Coming to your most recent book, In Feminism Against Progress, I understand you speak of what you call progressive theology. Interesting terms or term. What do you mean by it?
Well, by progress theology, I mean the belief, and I think it's a belief, not a fact, that progress theology. I simply mean the belief that things can go on getting better indefinitely, on any axis you care to name. I haven't set out to argue that case in detail in the book because it's more of a kind of starting point for everything else which follows. But in I think the first chapter, I make the claim. There are plenty of other great books you can read that argue against the belief in progress. And I think one of the famous ones is Christopher Lasch, who writes a book titled "The True and Only Heaven," where he gives an analysis of the American belief in progress. But I've taken as a starting point for the book the claim that this is not a fact; it's a belief. If you like, it's an ordering belief. That out of which politics and behavior and social structures and so on then flow. The idea that progress is a thing. I don't believe in it. The starting point really for all of the reflections that I've laid out in the book is that I lost my faith. I stopped believing in progress theology. I just came to think it was not true, and it did feel a lot like losing my faith. Because it's a very metaphysical belief that has strong trace connections to the Christianity which birthed it. I mean, in a sense, progressivism is a kind of Christian heresy, in that without Christianity we don't have the idea of history having any sort of directionality to it at all. With the idea that you get over an enormously long arc from creation through the fall to salvation to the end times to the day of judgment, and then finally to heaven on earth, or heaven, the everything, and finally rejoining our Maker. I mean, that's the fundamental Christian sort of spiritual narrative, the Christian eschatology, and the progressive eschatology is kind of the same. It just abstracts the spiritual elements from it and implies that we can achieve all of that here on earth. But it's structurally, it's the same eschatology as the Christian one. So it's deeply religious in nature. It's deeply religious in origin. It's so pervasive in the culture today as to be just part of the air that we breathe. The idea that things can get better and things can and should get better. I mean, it's difficult to think of a political party, even on the conservative side, that doesn't, or a think tank, or that does use the language of moving forward, of going forwards rather than backwards. And forwards is always better by definition. And I mean, it's just everywhere. Once you start looking for it, you see progress theology everywhere. It's simply how we make sense of the world.
I agree.
And it's not the only one. I mean, you don't have to look very far outside the Christian West to find plenty of cultures. Plenty of cultures that just don't think about life and the world and history in those terms at all. I mean, there are plenty of other ways of making sense of the world. The Chinese and the Indians have a completely different religious sort of metaphysical architecture for how they make sense of the big sweep of time. But the progressive one is fundamentally a Christian one in its structure. And it's just there everywhere, and I stopped believing in it. I just don't think it's a thing. The specific architecture of attaining heaven on earth over the course of history is just not true.
So, to be a little bit provocative or even cheeky, I'd be interested in your views. I suspect a lot of people are realising that there's not much room for progressive theology now. The evidence is suggesting that we're not going to see it in our lifetime. There's a lot of despair in Western societies. We know that from the research. That's easy to see. So we've rejected Christianity. The theology of progress is sort of looking pretty unappetizing, unreal, unachievable at the moment. Where do we find hope now?
Well, I don't think we have rejected progress theology as the thing. I mean, it's certainly percolating from the ground up. People are beginning to have some questions about how well it's borne out by reality. But people at the top, to the extent to the extent that people are insulated from stagnation, from political unrest, from street crime, etc., and so on. To the extent that people are insulated from that, they tend still to believe in progress. And I think you can see that in the socioeconomic breakdown of how people vote. And I'd be willing to bet that similar patterns are visible in Australia as in the United Kingdom. That people are more likely to vote for socially progressive parties the wealthier they are, because the counter argument isn't happening all around to quite such an extent. So you can still have hope. You can still believe that, if only we fiddle with the policy and give people even fewer restrictions and even less of a set of social norms, then perhaps we will attain heaven on earth. And and I think that it's still believable if you live in some peaceful, pleasant places where those policies haven't been implemented fully enough yet. It becomes increasingly obvious where they have been implemented that's not really what happens. But yeah, progress is a belief. It's not a fact. Where do we find hope after peak progress? Oh, that's a big question. I mean, I always have hope. But I mean, there are so many books that I didn't write when I set out to write Feminism Against Progress. I mean, this is my learning arc. In writing my first book, I thought I was going to have a chance to say everything, and it turns out that actually 50,000 words is nearly enough. You have to be every bit as selective about what you want to say. And so there was a book about the end of peak oil and the end of fossil fuels, which is coming. I mean, even the most ardent climate denialist will have to accept that the just in terms of mass, the amount of fossil fuel available to power our energy throughput is finite, right? And when it runs out, a huge amount of stuff is going to go with it, because I remain unconvinced that either nuclear or renewables or anything is going to be any sort of a functioning replacement. That's going to do interesting things to economic growth. It's going to do interesting things to our political, our financial architectures and our social architectures and our behavior. Yeah, it's utterly world shattering, reality shattering, and that's a whole. And it has implications for feminism as well. That was the original book I set out to write, about the dissonance between the women's movement and the environmental movement, which seems obvious to me, in as much as a great deal of women's liberation is predicated on the existence of labour-saving technologies, which is true. The end of easily available consumer goods and labour-saving technologies implies the necessity of quite a radical rethink of women's liberation, and that's a whole other book which I didn't have an opportunity to write. Where do I find hope? I think big changes are coming, likely in our life, likely in my lifetime, probably in both of our lifetimes. They're already here. Progress in the theological sense is, sometimes I think it really is as reductive as, what we think, what we mean when we point to progress is actually mostly energy throughput, which is mostly fossil fuels. And the less of the latter we have, the less of the former we're going to have. And in as much as I have hope, it's because humans are astonishingly adaptable. We've been around for a long time, and this wouldn't be the first civilization to come and go. And with humans carrying on in one form or another, I don't think we're heading for a sort of human, planetary scale human extinction event. I think there's a solid chance that this particular way of this particular form of humans existing on the planet is not going to last indefinitely. But are we going to prevail one way or another? Probably. And will we find new ways of flourishing together? Probably. I mean, it's a very qualified sort of an optimism, but I have immense faith in adaptability and creativity and robustness. And in as much as a lot of the things which I critique are also inseparable from the high energy throughput extractive civilizational paradigm that we exist in. Maybe it won't be all bad. I think a lot of it's going to suck making the trans. I remember expressing all of this to a conservative local to me, who said, the thing to remember, Mary, is if you read Gibbon, you read it quite quickly, but actually all of that stuff happened over quite a long period of time. And if you were living through the fall of the Roman Empire, you probably just most of the people who lived through the fall of the Roman Empire actually led fairly peaceful lives. It was just that some things changed, and not all of them for the better. And maybe that's what we're looking at now. There's plenty of opportunities still to lead good. I mean, there are always plenty of opportunities to lead good and decent lives, even if the world as we know it is in fact going to an end. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's the hopeful message you were looking for.
Well, I think what I would take out of that is a powerful reminder that in the end, not only we're adaptive, but when you come back to basics, you start to think about what really matters. Surely in the end, the thing to recognise is we're not only adaptive, we're relational. We're relational human beings.